Hello and welcome to the Final Frontiersmen, a YouTube channel about all things Trek with a heavy focus on the Star Trek Adventures role-playing game. I'm your host Bill, and I am going to take us back in time to one of the very first supplements for the Star Trek Adventures role-playing game, possibly the first supplemental source book for the game. We are going to do a review of the Command Division source book for the role-playing game. So as usual with our reviews, we have the alert system. If it's something of interest to keep your eye on, that's a yellow alert. If it's something I think is great, that's a red alert. And if it's something that's game-breaking, game-changing, amazing, that's a black alert. So without further ado, I will jump into the small window. I'll put some graphics on the big window, and hopefully I'll be able to express myself more clearly than I'm doing right now. So here we go. The Command Division supplement book is, of course, for Command Division characters. In Star Trek Adventures, that is typically your your command officers and the Conn officers. In the Next Generation era, they are the ones who are wearing the red uniforms, and in the TOS original series era, they're the ones in the gold uniforms. I think most of you know this by now, but just to keep it clear, Command Division, this book will cover the careers of command characters and Conn helmsman characters. So diving in, chapter 1 is just an introduction to the book. It tells you what to expect in each subsequent chapter. So the real meat starts in chapter 2, which is called the Command Division. The Command Division, like I said, it breaks it down into two parts. So most of this book will have a section about how the material relates to command characters, and then it will be followed by a very similar section, how it relates to Conn characters. So if I don't mention that for each individual chapter or each individual section, you could just assume that they do have content, unless it's specifically about one or the other. But the general information you find, you could just assume that they have it covered for both roles that you could have in the Command Division. So first of all, in chapter 2 with Command, it goes into the actual command structure of Starfleet. So it explains a lot of the background that's behind the Command Division. This would be the flavor for the setting. So you'll get information about Starfleet headquarters, the Joint Chiefs of Staffs, and so on. It explains things like fleet operations, research and development, the diplomatic corps, all the different types of admirals that you see on the show, what that means to be each type of admiral, as well as fleet captains. So if you're not really sure what these really high level officers in Starfleet do, what it's about, what their job's like, this chapter helps fill in the gaps and flesh out that detail if you're not sure how to play such a character or how as a GM to incorporate such a character or concept into your game. Now, when it goes into fleet ops, it tells you what exactly fleet operations is, what they do, how they organize fleets, what it's all about. Same with the judiciary. It goes into Federation law, the JAG, Judge Advocate General. It goes into legal procedures, court martials, all the flavor text detail behind that. The next thing it goes into, which I'm going to give a little special notice to in a second, is the Prime Directive, which of course in Star Trek it's generally known as the non-interference clause. The Prime Directive is kind of one of the main rules in Star Trek, so it explains to you, if you need that information, what the Prime Directive is all about. And I am going to give this a red alert. One thing that is great about this section is it has, I'm not sure how many, I didn't count, but there's a series of scenario examples of things that would push the Prime Directive to the limit. So it's sort of a what would you do as a captain in this situation, to illustrate that Prime Directive is not really a black and white issue. Yes, it looks very clear on paper that, okay, we can't interfere. But then if you look at these scenarios, it's like, well, which is the best choice? Like, am I interfering if I do this? Can I bend it? Is this a violation if I do it? Is this well within? And it goes into how a lot of captains really justify the way they do it. So you may have one captain say, this is the right course of action because of the Prime Directive, and the next captain say, the opposite is the right course of action because of the Prime Directive. So it's a really great section of the book, especially for players who are going to play captains or those in command, where you're really going to grapple with a lot of Prime Directive issues. It's nice to, almost like you're being put on the spot taking a test, like, oh wow, what would I do in this situation? So I really, really love that part of the chapter. That's my red alert for there. It does a little bit, there's just little touches giving details about other aspects too, like the temporal Prime Directive for time travel, what happens with violations to the Prime Directive. So again, this chapter is a lot of that backstory and background flavor information. It almost feels like an essay, especially this part, an essay about the Prime Directive. So I really found it fascinating, and I think a lot of Trek fans, and especially players who want to play COs and XOs, would really find it fascinating as well. There's a part about Starfleet Academy and how you can fit Command Division games and settings with Starfleet Academy, and what a cadet in both Command and Conn Division would look like. And so if you're playing at a cadet level, especially now with the newly released Lower Decks book, you have a lot more low-ranking stories, low-ranking characters, lower decker characters really exploding now in the fan base. So something like this will help if you have a character, a lower decker, who is going in the Command Division line. The next thing is Starship Operations and Command Officers. It gives more information about running a starship. So the general orders, standing orders, things that you would encounter if you are in control of a starship. As well as, just like this channel, we have our alert system for our reviews. On the starships, they have their alert systems and their different statuses. And this explains what the different statuses on the starship would be: red alert, yellow alert, cruise mode, intruder alert, and so on. It really breaks down the inner workings of a starship and operating a starship, and what it's like to be a commander of the starship. One other thing I found of some interest, I wasn't sure if I was going to give an alert, but I will. Yellow alert. On page 30, there's also one of the little sidebars. As you know, all the STA books, they have a lot of sidebars written in universe by a character or a group. So there's a sidebar on page 30 I really recommend. It is an officer's daily schedule, and it breaks down by time what their duty is, when they get off duty, what they do in their free time. So it's a great little slice of life you could look into the day of an officer to get ideas and be inspired of what it would be like to be serving and working in that position on the ship. So I thought that was a nice addition. I thought it was cool, and I think a lot of people will find that interesting. And other little details too, like when they say run a level 1 diagnostic, run a level 2 diagnostic. What's the difference between a 1 and a 2? You get those kind of details here for Starship Operations. The last part in this chapter is all about the senior staff. It has advice and ideas to explain how to use the chain of command in your game. So this book is really even more than for the Conn officers in the Command Division. This book is really focused as a handbook for commanding officers and executive officers. And I think if you're a player, or you have a player who is going to be one of these command level characters, the captain or the commander, the XO, then this is going to be a great chapter to let them read, or to read for yourself, to really get a grasp on what the background is like to be in this commanding position on the starship. It's your handbook as a leader on the starship. Really, really cool chapter. Really great introduction to the Command Division book. I loved it. Moving on, Chapter 3. Chapter 3 is called Command Division Characters. So this is about what the actual characters who are in the Command Division will be like, and the kind of people you will encounter in the Command Division. So it talks about the command school and the different flag ranks of flag officers, different flag admirals. So you know what each step means, what that represents in the hierarchy, so you could use it correctly in your game. If you're going to run an Admiralty level campaign or even Admiralty level missions, going above just being a starship or on a starbase doing the usual thing we see in Star Trek, but the actual overseeing the entire sector or a fleet or something as an admiral level campaign, you get all your advice here, and it shows you the kind of characters that of course would be part of this kind of campaign and would appear in these kind of episodes if it's just an episode and not your entire series. One other thing on here is it will go down. Again, it starts with the command characters as you're playing a command as your main, like XO, CO type thing. That would be your highest stat. And then it shows if your next highest discipline is security. So you're a command and security character. What kind of character does that represent? If you're command and medicine, what kind of character does that reflect? So it gives you a good breakdown for building your character as a player here to know, okay, if I am a commander, what does my second highest discipline say about me and my leadership style? So great advice for character building, character development. I thought that's always handy, especially for players who maybe are new to Star Trek or not entirely familiar with all the lore, and they need more ideas on how to customize their character. They have that here. It's followed by a list of useful or possible focuses for command characters. Again, you see that a lot online and social media. A lot of players asking what's a good focus for this kind of a character. What kind of focuses really represent a person in this position. So having a list of ideas to choose from with explanations as to why as well, I think also is very useful and very helpful for players. It also includes some new command level talents for command characters to take during character creation, which are not in the core book. After that section, you get pretty much the exact same thing, but focus for Conn officers, for the helmsmen. It explains what they are and what it means again if you are a Conn officer main and your second highest discipline is engineering. What does that say about you as a Conn officer? Followed again by a list of suggested or possible focuses and brand new talents to use for building new Conn officer characters. So this chapter 3, is basically for character creation and allowing the players to understand exactly what it means to be in that position, whether it's command or Conn inside this command division. Chapter 2, Chapter 3 are amazing to give to the player, pass to them as they are building their character or as they are researching their position after they decide they want to play a command division characters. Chapter 2, Chapter 3 is the main resource for the players in this source book. So highly recommended, especially if you have as I said, a character who may be not familiar with the series and not sure if they want to be a commander. A lot of players I see, even in my own group, a lot of people were reluctant to take the role of commander because it feels weird in a role-playing game to have someone that said, yeah, you are the leader, you are above the other players here. So I think a book like this and those 2 chapters will be really good at putting the right perspective in the minds of players, so they know how they should be portraying the characters and what's really expected of them and what their character looks like because of their decisions. Very, very nice guide. Very, very nice handbook for players and those types of characters. Chapter 4. Chapter 4 is Federation Vessels. This is interesting, and I will say this is the reason why I bought the book. I actually bought this book before I bought my physical copy. I should say before I got my physical copy of the core rulebook many, many years ago. I ordered this first to go along with the PDF I had. Because I wanted the starships, and just like in the last Unicorn game, Star Trek role-playing game, the very first source book I bought was also because of the ships that appeared in them. I love ships. So this chapter is all the brand new ships that it's introducing, which were not in the core rulebook. Again, this is pretty much the first supplement at the time, so this was the first big influx of new ships into Star Trek Adventures. Now, of course, it might be a bit outdated, especially with Utopia Planitia, which I will get to in one moment. But let me just list what you will find in here. It has the Daedalus class, the NX class. Constitution class refit is mentioned of what it means to be a refit, as you see in the original series movie era, but it doesn't provide any stats for the ship. It just explains what that means. It goes with the Hermes class, Oberth class, Centaur, Ambassador, Nebula, New Orleans, Olympic, Steamrunner, Norway, Saber, Sovereign, Luna. Sovereign's the reason why I bought this and the last Unicorn book too. I just needed that after First Contact. Now, all these Luna, of course, has appeared 723 times throughout all the different books of Star Trek Adventures, but I mean, come on, it's Luna. Everybody wants it. Now, here's an important point to mention, and I'm going to give a yellow alert because this is something to take note of. Yellow alert. I think Nebula, Hermes, New Orleans, and Saber, I might be wrong, but I think only those 4 have the exact same stats as they appear in Utopia Planitia. One thing to keep in mind is this is a very early supplement, and when Utopia Planitia came out, there's already been a number of years between when the game started and then. They had time, the writers, the developers had time to really rethink how to best establish starships, especially when taking refits into consideration and how those improve the stats of the ship as time goes on. So they have a new formula for calculating the statistics of a starship, especially concerning refits and the different time periods they appear in. That appeared in Utopia Planitia. So the majority of the ships that appear in this book, Command Division, have been revised slightly. It's not massive, but the stats have been revised in Utopia Planitia to fit this new universal system for calculating how to stat out a basic ship of each type. So if you use the ships from this book, Command Division, if you use the stats as is, it's not going to break anything. It's still perfectly fine. Most of Star Trek, I should say all of Star Trek Adventures, is adaptable and flexible. You're not going to ruin anything. But if you want the most up-to-date version of how starships are built and how they are progressed when you are improving the starships, you will likely want to use Utopia Planitia. But again, it's not going to ruin anything if you take the ships straight from this book. Again, Hermes, Nebula, New Orleans, Saber, at least, maybe I missed one. But those 4, there is no difference that I noticed between the 2 books. So really, it's not going to hurt anything, but you might want to be aware of that. Stand down, yellow alert. There's also a bunch of new, maybe not a bunch, but a few new talents to add for starships that were not in the core rulebook. Things like the captain's yacht that you could add to it. There's rules about, not rules, but introducing new small craft, shuttlecrafts. It has the, what do you have in there? It had the Type F shuttle, the Work Bee, Type 6, Type 7, Type 8, wait for it, Type 9. Who would have thought? And also Federation Attack Fighters. Again, same thing. These ones that appear later in Utopia Planitia and post-Utopia Planitia. Perhaps slightly different stats, but it's not going to ruin anything if you use the stats as you find them in this book. That's Chapter 4. It's all the new starships, Federation vessels. Nothing more I could say about that, but I love the ships. That's honestly why I bought this book years ago. Chapter 5. Chapter 5, here we go. And I think, actually, Chapter 5 is... Oh, yep. That's what it is. That's why. It's called Using the Command Division. Whereas Chapter 2 and 3 are really... Chapter 2 could be for everyone, just the background information. Chapter 3 definitely aimed to help the players. Chapter 5 is your Game Master chapter. This is all the advice of using the command division in your game. So GMs, you are going to want to go through this chapter and look at all the information it gives you. It uses, again, the style introduced in the core rulebook with the colored plot components, like the red plot, the gold plot, the blue plot, to introduce command, operation security, and science plots into your episodes. So it gives advice on how to use, first of all, red plots, because it's a command division book. And of course, there is a random table in there if you want to roll randomly to decide what kind of plot is going to appear in your story. It gives you a list of recommended episodes that you could watch from the various Star Trek series to reflect these kind of command level stories in action, so you could get a better feel of what it would look like when you run it in your own game. It also talks about consequences of breaking the Prime Directive. So as a GM, you could utilize that to add more drama into the game if your players have broken or bent the Prime Directive, or you see an opportunity to add that as a plot point in your game. It also does cover blue and gold plot points if you want a science focus, or maybe your command character was a doctor or was a chief scientist, but they have become a command level character. You might want these kind of plots. Gold plots if you want a little more action, security, combat heavy plots mixed into your game. You get the advice on building those episodes in this chapter. Same thing again, it will do for the con department. So if you want to have a con focused episode, it will give you red, blue, and gold plot elements that you could do, random tables to choose how to just make it on the fly and create a brand new episode for that. One other really good thing that I like in this book, and I'm going to give that a red alert because I found it very useful, especially back in the day learning the game. It really fleshes out and gives more options for social conflict and social combat. When it appeared in the original core rulebook, it felt too short and it didn't really go into a lot of detail that I would like of really explaining how to use social conflict in the game. Of course, over time it made more sense, but this book adds a lot more depth to social conflict. And it gives you a lot of examples of the different types of social conflict that could appear in your game or that you can use in your game. I think, yeah, I did make a note of that. Yeah, it gives you, again, where I don't want to say the core rulebook was lacking, but I felt like I didn't get as strong a grasp on it. This also talks about using social conflict as part of challenges or even extended tasks to accomplish whatever the social conflict is. So a lot of tools on social conflict. So if you weren't really sure exactly how to use it properly or how to use it dramatically, I think this part of the book will enhance that style for GMs who want that extra boost in learning how to do social conflict. Another thing, stand down, red alert, we're done with that. Another part in this chapter I liked is it has a whole section talking about telepathy and how to utilize telepathy, especially in things like social conflict. That's why it's kind of paired with that section of the book. There's a part about star bases and creating star bases. Again, I would suggest Utopia Planitia is now the better way of doing all of that. But this was the first chance of branching out into that level of detail. So you got a little bit here about creating Starbase. If you don't have Utopia Planitia, I think this will do the trick for you. One other thing it did add, I don't know if I'm going to give this an alert or not, because I'm not really sure how I feel about it. I'll give it a yellow alert because I think people should be aware of it. This adds, if you're not aware, this part of the book, it adds awards and commendations. This is like a new way to use reputation and renown of your characters as they reach milestones and they level up, to allow them to spend the reputation points that they're earning to achieve awards or be given a commendation. And now this is going to give another mechanical gamey element to your game. I know back in the day, a lot of players, a lot of people I talked to who got into Star Trek Adventures, they kind of complained a little because there's not really a lot of leveling up in the game. It's not like a D&D game where you get stronger and stronger. You're already top of the line Starfleet characters. You're already really good at what you do. But a lot of people didn't like that. They wanted that feeling of gaining new skills and achieving. Awards and commendations do that. You can spend your points to gain an award, and that not only provides you with receiving that narrative reward for your character, but there is a mechanical benefit for it. So, for example, let's see, I don't want to give an example, but just for example, what you'll see in the book is it will have the award name. It will have how much reputation points you have to spend to get it. It has the conditions that you must meet to earn that award. So you can't just pick anything. It has to actually be thematically appropriate for your for the character, for whatever they did. And then it gives you the mechanical benefit of how you can spend that power, almost like a talent in the game, to do something special or to gain some kind of benefit. Positive effect. And so it gives a little bit of a game-like feeling to the level up. I think some people might be interested in having that if they're disappointed without having that level up feeling in the role-playing game. Personally, I don't really need it. I tried using it slightly, just very little with my group, and I think it was forgotten about pretty quickly, because just the narrative, just the whole RPing aspect that is the center of Star Trek Adventures, I think that's been satisfying everyone. Certainly satisfies me. So I don't really need it, but if you need it, here it is. There it goes. Another thing, how about one more yellow alert? This definitely I'll give a yellow alert. Fleet engagement. So if you're not just having a single ship, but if you are running an entire fleet engagement, like you might see in Deep Space Nine with Dominion fleet versus Federation fleet, if you have a massive fleet of ships and you're doing an action scene with that, this gives you rules on how to play that out, especially if you're doing an Admiralty level campaign where your character might be in command of many ships and you are having them all engage at once. This streamlines how to run a fleet together, as well as if you have player characters on one or more of the ships in the fleet during this scene, how you spread out those actions, representing them being on different ships, as well as an entire fleet doing an action at once. So if you want to run something huge, like one of those Dominion War battles, this is going to be the rules for you. And stand down, yellow alert, you won't do it. All right, last one is Chapter 6. Chapter 6 is pretty easy to sum up. This is command personnel. Command personnel, I cannot talk tonight. Command personnel, these are the NPCs you could use in the game or that you would see that are all related to Command Division and Conn Department. So you'll get actual named NPCs, famous characters you could use in the game, like Commodore Robert April, now much more famous thanks to Strange New Worlds, Vice Admiral Nechayev that appears frequently on Next Generation. You'll get part of the diplomats for Diplomat Corps. You get Sarek, Curzon Dax, even Loaxana Troy. Who doesn't want to have her? There's also other nameless generic NPCs to fill different roles in the Command and Conn divisions. So if you need to pull a character quickly, you just jump straight to this chapter. And that's basically it. Yeah, that's chapter 6. And that's the book. That is the entire book of the Command Division supplement. So my final thoughts are right now at this point, the starship stats, of course, are outdated. The rules for creating the starships are outdated. So if you want the most up-to-date, best examples of how to use each class's starship, you are going to want Utopia Planitia. But if you don't have it, there's nothing wrong with using this book. Just be aware that these are not the current level of rules for starships. So at this point, it's bound to happen after such a long history that things are going to change and be different from the very, very early days when they were just building everything from scratch. So it's not a huge mark against it, but just be aware of it. While it does have good advice for Conn characters, for the helmsmen and that, I think this is truly a handbook for command players, captains, XOs, admirals. I think those players will get far more out of the content here than the Conn officers. That's not to say there's not a lot for the Conn officers players to play with and to take, but I feel, as it is, of course, the Command Division, I feel the majority of the content here is going to be really, really useful for command level players and useful for Conn players. So also keep that in mind. With that said, as a handbook for command officers, it's almost indispensable to have for GMs and also command level players to get that information and get that level of detail to really inform your story and your role play. So I have to recommend it for that. There are a lot of different rules you can add in the game. Again, Admiralty campaigns, fleet operations, controlling fleets. So there's a lot of variety for GMs to have. And while it is showing its age as one of the first supplements, it is still up to the same level of standards as your usual Star Trek Adventures book. So you are going to get a lot out of it as a player and as a GM. So it's a great resource to have at the table when you are playing with your group, especially if you have command level characters in your group. And that is it. That is my review of the Command Division. I hope that helped explain what you will find in this book so you can make a decision if it's right for you, if you want to buy it. I do recommend it, again, for mostly command level players and GMs. The information in there is going to give you a lot to sink your teeth into for your games. So I think I'm done with that one. We got 2 more divisions coming up in the future, so stay tuned for them. But thank you for watching this one, and until next time, as always, stay safe out there, everyone. Peace and long life. I'll see you.